Mr. Godfrey Bloom.
President, opportunity of wishing the East European cities well in the coming of the very early skiing season, and snow and ice that's come there, what of course is indicative of the fact that, as independent science has now confirmed, that the globe is actually cooling and has been cooling since 2002, broadly flat since 1998. So we're all talking about something here which isn't happening. I've heard time and time again members here talk of CO2 as a pollutant. A pollutant is a life-giving natural gas. It gives me the impression that some of our members haven't had the benefit of a formal education. Isn't this really just about the state being able to get its hand in ordinary people's trouser pocket to steal yet more tax from them? Isn't this all about political control? Isn't all this about politics and big business? The whole thing's a sham. This bogus hypothesis, this ridiculous nonsense that man-made CO2 is causing global warming. Enough, please, before we damage irrevocably the global economy.
On TNS Radio, Land of the Free. I am your host, Patrick Lynch. I'm broadcasting from England, and we're going to be going over a host of topics. We've got a couple of guests tonight. Later on, we've got Walking Turtle to You, a Native American and herbalist from Kansas. And I'm delighted to have on the line Mr. Godfrey Bloom, the UKIP MEP, UK Independence Party MEP. Mr. Bloom, are you there, please?
Yes, good evening to you, Patrick.
Good evening, sir. How are you?
Yes, tickety-boo, thank you.
Are you fresh back from Brussels, I understand?
Yes, got back yesterday from the House of Nonsense.
Right. And you weren't delayed by any kind of cataclysmic events or anything?
No, I came out, had a nice easy journey on the train, a long one, but it was pretty straightforward stuff, thank you.
Excellent. We'll be covering the aerospace ban from the alleged volcanic dust a bit later, I'm sure. Now, Mr. Bloom, Godfrey Bloom, is a UK Independence Party MEP, is a professional economist with 40 years in financial services experience, and things have been going quite extraordinary for you. You've developed quite a following with your outspoken remarks in in the European Parliament. I particularly enjoyed that one. I wanted to share that with people. Today, it mentions there's going to be $1 trillion bailout for Europe, and today it's actually announced that the total jobless in England is 2.5 million and 53,000 in the first part of 2010. So things aren't looking good for the English economy. What are your thoughts on how the European Parliament has treated England?
Well, we've got a problem. I was a guest lecturer as a financial economist, not an academic, but a guest lecturer at Cambridge University back in the late 1990s, where I was explaining to both faculties and undergraduates that it was actually impossible to have a one-size-fits-all currency, that it was simply not possible to do that. It has no historical precedent, and therefore was doomed to failure, and I gave it about 10 years. I was a little bit out in my timing. It looks like perhaps it's going to be nearer 12 or maybe even 13 years. But it was always doomed to failure, and funnily enough, I was over in Ireland talking to the University College Dublin undergraduates about 5 years ago, while that tiger economy was at its height, and I said, you've got to understand that this is actually built on sand. Sooner or later, the reckoning will come, because you're actually running with something that is fundamentally unsound. And I was regarded as being something of an eccentric or maverick economist. People didn't take me frightfully seriously. But of course all that's coming home to roost now. As we've seen, the first one to start crumbling is Greece. And of course,
Yes.
now it's become received wisdom, hasn't it? That economists all over the world are saying, well, then it'll be Portugal, Spain, and Italy, so on and so forth. So
Ireland, yeah.
and Ireland, but this is something that was eminently foreseeable. And when I was, interestingly enough, working for an investment company in the early part of 2000 and whatever it was, I think it was, we were buying Greek bonds which were yielding a coupon of 12%, 11, 12%, because we knew that as soon as it went into the euro, they would be underwritten by the European Central Bank. And therefore, it was one of the few no-brainers you get as an investment manager. The coupon went to 5%, but the capital value of the bond shot through the ceiling, and we all knew that Greece was cheating. We all knew that in the City of London, and all the politicians knew that as well, but they were desperate to get more countries on board, because it's a political currency. It always has been. It's got nothing to do with economics, and of course the devastation this is going to cause in the next 18 months is going to be simply shocking.
Well, there's $1 trillion bailout for Europe. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the problem with that is you've got to understand, and those undergraduates listening to you reading economics, I think you'll find will know that the trouble with the euro is that it has no lender of last resort. It isn't like the dollar. It isn't like the Fed. It isn't like California defaulting and the cover coming from the Fed. It doesn't work like that. There is
It's quite a new
no
currency,
money.
isn't it? Does that have any bearing that it's quite a new currency?
Well, there isn't any money because it isn't structured in the way to give a reserve. So consequently, if a country defaults on its debts, it has to be rescued by a collation, if you will, of other countries putting money in to a European rescue fund. And of course, the people that are putting the money in don't actually have any money of their own. So you've got the funny situation, really, of like drunks holding each other up in the street. We've got Portugal lending Greece money, and Portugal is equally drunk. I'm sorry, I mean broke. And so this is doomed to failure. The amount of money they've put in will paper over the cracks, I would argue, technically for 12 months, but of course markets look ahead. So I would give it till October before the whole thing starts to crumble and people look at the situation in Portugal and Spain.
Well, we know what's happened in America. We have deep analysis from Griffin and Webster Tarpley and Salente, and we're very familiar with how that came about. It's a complete open robbery from Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan. Congress was threatened, the nations pay off Goldman Sachs and Morgan, and the pension funds are needed to pay for the bailout. In Greece, they're having the higher retirement age, and their answer, the Bilderberger Prime Minister's answer, is to higher the retirement age and put a cap on wages. But in America, Congress wouldn't go along with this, and suddenly 1,000 points dropped. Apparently there was no fat finger. They've admitted that. 1,000 points in the market dropped. I think it was within 15 minutes. And they admitted causing panic in Congress with the black boxes and the brokerage houses, plunge protection, White House gangs, and to audit the Fed. But and then the Congress dumps the move to audit the Federal Reserve. So how obvious in Europe have you noticed? I mean, they're having reforms on Wall Street at the moment, so-called reforms. I mean, we know that Goldman Sachs bet on the housing market and bet against it. And people lost their houses in droves and are still suffering. But do you notice any similar scams in England or Europe generally?
Well, it's really it's not just a Europe-wide; it's a global, almost a global phenomenon.
Yes.
Of course, although not
Totally engineered.
and the old dominions, who have a completely different banking system of banking regulation. But just let's look at Europe and North America. We have to go back and look at the Civil Reinvestment Act, of course, which actually made the concept of due diligence in banking in America illegal because it was regarded as being discriminatory. So what we